A lump of corroded bronze pulled from a shipwreck holds the secrets of an ancient computer. This is the story of the Antikythera Mechanism, a device that rewrites everything we thought we knew about the technological prowess of our ancestors. By the end, you will see the timeline of human innovation not as a straight line, but as a story with forgotten peaks and astonishing losses. We will uncover how a single artifact could predict eclipses and model the cosmos with precision years over 2,000 years ago, and we will ask what other marvels vanished when great libraries fell. How does our own civilization look when you realize another once reached such heights? The storm-tossed Aegean Sea in the autumn of 1900, and one was no place for a leisurely dive. A crew of Greek sponge fishermen, seeking refuge from a gale near the treacherous coast of Antikythera, decided to explore the depths while they waited for the weather to calm. What they saw below would change their lives and ultimately our understanding of history. Amid the shadowy ruins of an ancient shipwreck, their hands, accustomed to handling delicate sponges, brushed against the cold forms of marble and bronze. They surfaced with reports of a graveyard of statues, men and horses, lying in the silent dark. This was not just any wreck. It was a Roman cargo ship, a vessel that had sunk around 60 BC while transporting an astonishing load of Greek art, luxury goods, and plunder back to Italy. The subsequent salvage operation, one of the first major underwater archaeology projects ever attempted, recovered breathtaking bronze sculptures and marble masterpieces. But among these celebrated finds was an unassuming lump of corroded Greek of a large book. It was logged with the other artifacts and sent to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. To the archaeologists unpacking these treasures, this particular piece seemed unremarkable, perhaps a damaged piece of a statue or a simple nautical instrument. It was catalogued and essentially forgotten, stored away while the glorious statues took center stage. The true nature of this object was hidden, quite literally, under a thick, hard shell of calcareous deposits from 2,000 years under the sea. It looked like a rock, a piece of seabed debris that had fused to the artifact. For nearly half a century, it sat in a museum case, labeled vaguely as a piece of an astrolabe, a navigational tool. The breakthrough came from a moment of simple, observant curiosity. In 1902, a museum archaeologist named Valerio Stais was examining the fragmented lump. He noticed something that should not have been there. Embedded in the crust, he saw the faint, precise outline of a gear wheel. Then another. In an age believed to be devoid of complex machinery, the sight of intricate bronze gears was as bewildering as it would be to find a smartphone in a medieval castle. It was a technological artifact in a classical archaeological context, a complete anomaly. Stais proposed it might be an ancient astronomical clock, but the idea was so radical, so disruptive to the accepted timeline of human invention, that it was largely dismissed by his peers. The conventional wisdom was firm. The ancient Greeks were philosophers and artists, not mechanical engineers. So the strange mechanism was set aside once more, its secrets locked within its calcified shell. This chance discovery by sponge divers, this initial misidentification, set the stage for a mystery that would take decades and the most advanced technology of the modern age to solve. It begs a quiet question: how many other revolutionary truths are sitting in museum basements right now, waiting for someone to look at them with new eyes? That green, crusted lump was a kind of palimpsest, but not of parchment. Its surface, a hard shell of sea deposit, was like a page that had been written on, scraped clean, and written on again by time itself. The first words scholars tried to read upon it were in a language they understood, the language of medieval astronomy. For decades, the dominant theory was that this was an astrolabe, a handheld device used for navigation and telling time by the stars. It was a sensible guess, born from a very human kind of bias, the assumption that the past must have used tools that look somewhat like our own, or at least like the ones from our recent history. Experts of the early 20th century were familiar with clockwork and with the astrolabes used by Renaissance explorers. To them, the idea that ancient Greeks could have built something more complex than that seemed almost fanciful. One prominent historian of science dismissed it as a medieval object that had somehow fallen into the older wreck, an anomaly not worth serious study. This was the clockwork hypothesis, a comfortable idea that kept the timeline of progress neat and orderly. But to understand why it failed, we need to see what an astrolabe actually does. An astrolabe is a beautiful and ingenious instrument, a flat disk of metal with moving parts that act as a portable model of the sky. You can use it to find the time from the sun's position or to identify stars. Yet for all its elegance, it is fundamentally a two-dimensional device. Its gears, if it has any, are simple. They do not calculate. They do not model the complex, varying motions of the moon or predict eclipses years in advance. The Antikythera fragments, even in their corroded state, hinted at something far more intricate, a three-dimensional assembly of interlocking gears with teeth counted in precise, odd numbers. This is the heart of the mystery. The device possessed what engineers call differential gearing, a system that allows one gear to drive two others at different speeds, a technology not seen again until the sophisticated mechanical clocks of the 18th century. The astrolabe theory was like finding a modern smartphone and calling it a simple calculator because that is the only frame of reference you have. We see this pattern again and again in archaeology. Consider the so-called Baghdad battery, a clay jar from 2,000 years ago found with an iron rod and a copper cylinder inside. To a modern mind, it looks like a primitive galvanic cell, and many have called it exactly that, an ancient battery. But without any wires or any clear purpose for electrical current in the archaeological record, that interpretation says more about our own electrified world than it does about the past. It might have been used for electroplating, or it might have been a storage jar for sacred scrolls. We project our own technology onto the silent artifact. So what does this tell us about how we view history? We tend to imagine progress as a straight, upward line. We had the wheel, then the printing press, then the steam engine, then the computer. An object like the Antikythera mechanism disrupts that smooth narrative. It suggests that innovation is not a constant march forward, but a flickering flame that can burn brilliantly in one era and be completely snuffed out in the next. It forces us to ask a humbling question. What incredible inventions from our own time might future archaeologists completely misinterpret because the context for understanding them has been lost? The comfortable clockwork hypothesis could not survive the evidence hidden in the crust. To read the true text of this ancient palimpsest, scholars would need a new kind of vision, one that could see through stone and time. The true nature of the mechanism began to reveal itself not on a museum bench, but on a light table in a darkened room. Decades after its discovery, a historian of science named Derek de Solla Price obtained permission to study the enigmatic fragments. He was not an archaeologist by trade, but a scholar fascinated by the history of scientific instruments. His tool was not a brush or a trowel, but the newly available technology of gamma-ray and X-ray imaging. As he carefully examined the ghostly images, the crust that had hidden the truth for so long became transparent. Beneath it, he saw a universe in miniature. Dozens of precisely cut bronze gear wheels emerged from the shadows, some with teeth so fine they seemed impossible for ancient hands to have made. Price spent years studying these radiographic shadows, measuring gear counts, and tracing potential alignments. He was a detective faced with a puzzle where most of the pieces were missing, trying to reconstruct an entire book from a few scattered sentences. In 1974, he published his groundbreaking findings in a paper titled Gears from the Greeks. His conclusion was revolutionary and definitive. This was not a navigational tool or a simple clock. It was an astronomical calculator, a mechanical computer designed to model the cosmos. Price proposed a specific model for how the device worked. He identified a complex train of gears that would have been turned by a hand crank on the side. As you turned this crank, a series of dials on the front and back would move, displaying the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and likely the 5 known planets against the background of the zodiac. But it did much more than just show positions. One of its most brilliant features was modeling what astronomers call the lunar anomaly. The Moon does not orbit Earth at a constant speed. It speeds up and slows down in a predictable cycle. To represent this on a simple clockwork model is incredibly difficult, yet the Antikythera Mechanism's designers solved it. They used a pin and slot device on one of the central gears, a clever bit of engineering that made the gear's output speed vary, perfectly mimicking the Moon's irregular motion across the sky. The device also contained the keys to predicting eclipses, events that held immense cultural and often fearful significance in the ancient world. Price identified inscriptions referring to 2 crucial celestial cycles. The first is the Saros cycle, a period of approximately 18 years and 11 days after which the Sun, Earth, and Moon return to nearly the same relative geometry, causing a similar pattern of eclipses to repeat. The second is the Metonic cycle, a period of 19 years after which the phases of the Moon recur on the same dates of the solar year. By mechanically tracking these cycles, the device could predict when an eclipse might occur, and even whether it would be solar or lunar. Think of Price's work as the first successful translation of a lost language. He was holding an instruction manual for the universe, written not in words but in mathematics and bronze. Without his patient, meticulous analysis, the mechanism might still be labeled as an odd medieval relic. His foundational work proved, beyond any doubt, that the ancient world had achieved a level of mechanical sophistication that would not be seen again for over a millennium. It was a computer in every meaningful sense of the word, a machine that processed input data, the turning of a crank, to generate an output, a prediction of celestial events. Yet for all its brilliance, Price's model was still a sketch. The radiographic images of his time were like looking at a dense forest through a thick fog. You could see the outlines of the trees, but not every branch or leaf. His work cracked the cosmic code, but it left deeper questions unanswered. Who built this marvel, and for what precise purpose? To find those answers, the fragments would need to be seen in a light far more revealing than any X-ray. The fragments, however, still held secrets too small for the X-ray eyes of the 1970s. To move from a brilliant sketch to a complete blueprint required a technological revolution of its own. In 2005, the most fragile pieces of the mechanism were carefully transported from Athens to a specialized laboratory in England. Their destination was not an archaeology department, but a facility equipped with a massive 8-ton machine typically used for industrial inspection. This was a microfocus X-ray computed tomography scanner, a device that could peer inside the calcified blocks with a clarity Director Solla Price could never have dreamed of. The Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, an international team of scientists, historians, and astronomers, had assembled to perform what amounted to a digital autopsy on the ancient device. For the first time, they could see every hidden gear, every pin, every layer of the corrosion, in 3 dimensions and at a resolution finer than a human hair. Project member Mike Edmonds described the moment of revelation as seeing the mechanism come to life inside a computer. They were no longer looking at shadows, but at precise virtual models they could rotate, disassemble, and study without ever touching the original bronze. Yet the most astonishing discovery was not a new gear, it was text. The CT scanner revealed thousands of tiny Greek characters, inscriptions that had been engraved on the front and back plates of the device and then hidden for centuries beneath the mineral crust. These were not just labels, they were a detailed user manual and theory of operation, etched in bronze for eternity. The letters, many less than 2 millimeters high, were far too small and fragile to ever be cleaned physically. But digitally, scientists like Tony Freeth could now peel back the layers of time. Using advanced imaging software, they performed a kind of virtual archaeology, digitally unwrapping the text from the curved surfaces of the plates and flattening it out for reading, like carefully unfolding an ancient metal scroll. The inscriptions were a revelation. They confirmed the device's purpose with explicit instructions. One passage explained how to set the dials to represent the current date, a calibration step. Others detailed the colors and directions associated with upcoming eclipses, information of deep cultural and perhaps ceremonial importance. Most significantly, the text began to speak of planets. It mentioned the wanderers Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, describing their periodic motions and their retrograde loops, those moments when they appear to move backwards in the sky. This was the smoking gun. The mechanism was not just a solar and lunar calculator, it was a complete orrery, a model of the entire known cosmos. The process can be compared to a modern medical scan. Just as an MRI allows doctors to see the intricate structures of the human body without making a single incision, this high-resolution tomography allowed researchers to diagnose the inner workings of a 2,000-year-old mind, revealing its intellectual anatomy without causing any harm. It was a perfect fusion of the past and the future, where 21st century technology became the key to unlocking a 1st century BC invention. This collaborative effort, bridging archaeology, physics, engineering, and philology, shows us that the biggest historical puzzles are no longer solved by lone scholars in dusty libraries. They are cracked by teams using tools from other disciplines to ask questions we never thought to ask before. The digital data from these scans provided the final, irrefutable blueprint, the raw material from which a true understanding of the mechanism's genius could finally be rebuilt. But a blueprint is just a plan. To hear the device speak, to see its gears turn and its dials spin, we needed to build it again. The inscriptions revealed by the CT scanner were more than just text. They were the source code for the ancient device, written in elegant Koine Greek. These tiny letters, etched directly onto the bronze plates, were not poetic verses or decorative dedications. They were functional, a user manual and technical guide fused with the machine itself. To operate the mechanism, you would have needed to read these words. They provided the data it could not calculate on its own, and the instructions for interpreting its complex outputs. Philologists like Alexander Jones painstakingly translated this embedded manual, revealing a device of astonishing scope. One set of inscriptions was a parapegma, a star calendar that correlated the rising and setting of specific constellations with the solar year. This would have allowed a user to know not just the date but the seasonal changes in the night sky. Another, more ominous set of texts dealt with eclipses. Inscriptions spoke of the spiral of Saros, directly linking the gear train to eclipse prediction, and included warnings about the color and direction of upcoming events, details that held deep cultural meaning. Perhaps most surprisingly, the texts also made reference to major Panhellenic athletic games, including the Olympics. This blend of information is telling. The mechanism was not a sterile scientific instrument kept in a philosopher's study. It was a device that connected celestial mechanics to life on the ground, to the agricultural calendar, to religious ceremonies, and to the great cultural festivals that unified the Greek world. It tied the cosmos to community. To understand its function, think of a modern scientific calculator. On its surface are buttons labeled with mathematical functions: sine, cosine, logarithm. The inscriptions on the Antikythera mechanism served the same purpose. Phrases adjacent to dials acted as labels, explaining what each pointer showed. One crucial passage, translated by researchers, reads, "To set the device in motion, turn the hand crank in a clockwise direction until the day indicator aligns with the current month." This is a direct step-by-step technical procedure. Another inscription near a small dial believed to track the 4-year cycle of games simply states Nemea, referring to the Nemean Games, one of the 4 crown competitions. This combination of high science and cultural reference points is the key to understanding the mechanism's true purpose. It was not merely for prediction, it was for education and display. A scholar or perhaps a teacher could use it to demonstrate the orderly, mechanical nature of the cosmos, to show how the Saros cycle dictated eclipse patterns, and to plan for the great gatherings that defined their society. It made the abstract mathematics of the heavens tangible, something you could hold in your hands and turn with a crank. The inscriptions confirmed it was a sophisticated pedagogical tool, a predictive engine, and a cultural touchstone all in one. It answered the question of why such a complex device would be built. It served to bridge the gap between human understanding and the majestic, sometimes intimidating, clockwork of the universe. But if this was the user's guide, who then were the authors, who possessed the knowledge to write this cosmic code in bronze? The text etched on the bronze was the software, but the gears were the hardware, a physical symphony of mathematics. To truly grasp the genius of the Antikythera mechanism, we must look past the inscriptions and into the machine itself. This was not a simple collection of wheels, it was a miniature cosmos engineered from metal. Ancient craftsmen, using nothing more than hand drills, files, and bronze casting techniques perfected over centuries, created a labyrinth of interlocking gears. Some of these gear wheels are astonishingly small, with teeth only about 1 millimeter long, cut with a precision that would challenge a modern machinist even with powered tools. The mechanical engineering prowess on display here does not belong to the classical world as we typically imagine it. It rivals the finest work of European clockmakers from the 18th century. This was a peak of technological art that was then lost to history for over 1,000 years. The heart of this mechanical brain lies in its specific gear trains. Researchers have identified that the device contained at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, and possibly many more that are now missing. A single hand crank on the side served as the input. As you turned it, this motion was distributed through a complex forest of gears, each designed to rotate at a different, mathematically precise speed. One major gear train calculated the position of the sun, another, far more complex one, tracked the moon. The most remarkable of all is what engineers call a differential gear assembly. This is a system that allows one input to drive 2 outputs at different speeds, and it is used in every modern automobile to allow wheels to turn at different rates when going around a corner. In the Antikythera mechanism, this brilliant piece of engineering was used to solve a celestial problem, modeling the moon's variable speed across the sky. The moon does not orbit Earth at a constant pace, it speeds up and slows down in a predictable cycle. The ancient designers understood this anomaly perfectly. They incorporated a pin and slot device on a central gear, a kind of mechanical cam, that gently varied the output speed of the gear train, making the moon pointer on the dial speed up and slow down just as the real moon does. This single feature demonstrates a breathtaking synthesis of astronomical observation and mechanical innovation. Experts like Michael Wright, a former curator of mechanical engineering who dedicated years to building physical reconstructions of the device, speak of the immense challenge these ancient engineers faced. Achieving the correct tooth profiles and perfect spacing between dozens of gears, all cut by hand, required not just skill but a deep, iterative process of design and testing. Each gear tooth had to mesh flawlessly with the next, with minimal friction, or the entire delicate calculation would be thrown off. It was a work of both art and rigorous science. Think of it like this: you are asked to build a working model of the solar system using only wooden gears you have carved yourself. You must make Mercury complete 88 rotations for every one of Earth's, and Saturn only a fraction of a turn, all from one spinning axle. The patience and iterative genius required is almost beyond comprehension. This bronze symphony, this hardware, was the physical manifestation of advanced Greek astronomy. It turned abstract celestial cycles into something you could feel through the resistance of a crank and see in the gradual sweep of a pointer across a dial of the zodiac. It makes you wonder how many prototypes were made and discarded on the workshop floor before this one perfect model emerged, and what other mechanical wonders, now lost to time, might have once graced the libraries and studies of the ancient world. The true magic of the device happened on its face. Picture an ancient scholar, perhaps in a quiet library in Rhodes or a learned court in Pergamon, turning the small hand crank on the side. With each gentle rotation, 7 slender bronze pointers began to sweep across a grand, circular dial. This was not a static chart, but a moving map of the heavens, a mechanical orrery bringing the cosmos to life in real time. The front plate was a masterpiece of information design, a concentric series of rings etched with fine detail. The outermost ring displayed the 360 degrees of the zodiac, the band of constellations through which the sun, moon, and planets appear to travel. Inside that was a ring marking the 365-day Egyptian calendar, a practical earthly timeline, and on those rings danced the pointers, each representing a celestial body. One for the sun with its golden orb, one for the moon showing its phase through a tiny, rotating black and white ball, and 5 others for the wandering stars, the planets known to the ancient world: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The challenge of modeling the planets was immense, far greater than tracking the sun and moon. Their motion is not uniform. They periodically slow down, stop, and appear to move backwards against the stars in what is called retrograde motion. To a Greek astronomer, this was a profound puzzle. The Antikythera Mechanism's creators solved it mechanically. Through an elaborate and still partially understood system of epicyclic gears, small gears riding on larger ones, the device mathematically reproduced these elegant loops in the bronze arcs of its pointers. It was a physical demonstration of the most advanced astronomical theories of its day, turning abstract geometrical models into tangible motion. Even more ingenious was the solution for the moon. Its orbit is not a perfect circle, but an ellipse, causing its speed to vary. The designers incorporated a pin and slot device on a crucial gear. As the gear turned, a pin on one wheel engaged a slot on another, subtly speeding up and slowing down the rotation, making the moon pointer mimic the celestial reality with stunning accuracy. To use this front dial was to run a cosmic simulation. You could crank forward to see where Mars would be in 6 months, or turn backwards to check the lunar phase on the day of a historic battle. It was in every sense an analog computer. The experience would be familiar to us today, though the technology is vastly different. It functioned like a planetarium software app, something like Stellarium or Celestia, but crafted from bronze and powered by human hand instead of electricity. You input a date by turning the crank to the correct position, and the software, the gear trains, process that input to generate an output, the positions of the celestial bodies on the display. This user interface invites a profound question. How did seeing the cosmos modeled as a predictable, mechanical system change the philosophical understanding of the people who used it? For centuries, celestial events were seen as the direct actions of gods, omens to be feared or revered. But here was a device that said, with the turn of a handle, that eclipses could be foretold, that planetary loops were not chaotic but orderly, that the universe might operate on a set of divine but knowable rules. The front dial was more than a display, it was an argument for a rational, comprehensible cosmos, made not with words but with the silent, turning certainty of precision gears. While the front dial displayed the living sky, the back of the device held the calendar of cosmic events. Here, the design shifted from a grand circle to a series of intricate spiral dials, coiled like the shell of a snail. These were not for showing the present, but for predicting the future. The largest and most complex of these spirals was dedicated to one of the most awe-inspiring phenomena in the ancient world, the eclipse. By tracking a celestial rhythm known as the Saros cycle, the mechanism could forecast lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, years or even decades in advance. The Saros cycle is a period of approximately 223 lunar months, or about 18 years and 11 days. After this interval, the Sun, Earth, and Moon return to nearly the same relative geometry, and a similar pattern of eclipses repeats. The genius of the mechanism was in its gearing. A complex train of wheels translated the slow, grand turn of this 18-year cycle into a manageable number of rotations of the hand crank. As you turn the input, a pointer would crawl along the spiral track of the Saros dial, moving from one cell to the next, each cell representing a single lunar month. Inscriptions in these cells acted as a prophetic calendar, marking which months were likely to contain an eclipse and whether it would be solar or lunar. But the predictions went even deeper. Some of the etched text included specific details about the expected time of day for the eclipse and, most intriguingly, words describing potential colors. An eclipse might be predicted as dusky or blood red. In a world where such events were often seen as powerful omens, messages from the gods, this information was not merely scientific data. It was culturally critical knowledge. It allowed those who possessed the device to prepare, to interpret, and perhaps to wield the social and political influence that came with seeming to foretell the heavens' will. Alongside the grand Saros spiral were smaller subsidiary dials, each tracking other essential cycles for organizing time. One displayed the Metonic cycle, a period of 19 years after which the phases of the moon recur on the same solar calendar dates. This was vital for keeping lunar-based religious festivals in sync with the agricultural seasons. Another showed the Callippic cycle, a refinement of the Metonic cycle spanning 76 years. And a small 4-year dial almost certainly tracked the cycle of the Panhellenic Games, including the Olympics, turning celestial mechanics into a schedule for the greatest cultural and athletic events of the Greek world. Think of the rear of the device as the administrative brain of an ancient society. A priest or an official could consult it not just for an eclipse warning, but to know when to plant based on a star's rising, when to hold a major festival, and when the whole Greek world would gather for the games. It unified astronomy, timekeeping, religion, and civic life into one bronze instrument. This predictive power invites a sobering reflection. In an age where celestial events could incite fear or be seen as divine displeasure, what immense authority rested with the individual or institution that owned this machine? To predict an eclipse was to demonstrate a profound connection to the cosmic order, a form of knowledge that could stabilize a society or consolidate tremendous power. The rear dials transformed the mysterious, sometimes terrifying, vault of heaven into a scheduled, knowable list of appointments. It represented the ultimate ambition of Greek science, to not only understand nature, but to bring its most formidable cycles under the domain of human foresight. The moon's journey across the night sky holds a secret rhythm, a subtle hesitation in its pace that the ancient Greeks had already detected. Centuries before the mechanism was built, an astronomer named Hipparchus had meticulously documented this lunar anomaly, the fact that the moon does not move at a constant speed. Its orbit is elliptical, causing it to speed up when closer to Earth and slow down when farther away. To build a machine that merely showed a moon moving at a steady pace would have been a lie against the cosmos they so revered. The creators of the Antikythera mechanism faced a profound engineering challenge: how to translate this observed celestial irregularity into the perfect circular motion of a bronze gear. Their solution was a stroke of mechanical genius so elegant it feels almost playful, a device now called the pin and slot mechanism. At the heart of one of the main gear trains, they did not place a simple gear with its axle at the center. Instead, they mounted a pin on one gear, positioned away from its center. This pin then engaged a long, radial slot cut into the face of the adjoining gear. As the first gear turned with a constant, steady input from the hand crank, the off-center pin would push and pull the slot. Because the distance from the pin to the center of rotation was constantly changing, the speed of the second gear's output varied in a smooth, predictable cycle. This variable motion was then transferred directly to the pointer representing the moon on the front dial. In real time, as you turn the crank, you would see the moon's pointer speed up, slow down, and speed up again, mirroring the actual dance of the moon in the sky with breathtaking accuracy. Modern engineers who study this component are often left in awe. Michael Wright, who built a working reconstruction, describes it as a physical analog computer solving a specific astronomical equation. It is a mechanical embodiment of the mathematical concept of epicyclic motion, where a complex curve is generated by combining two simpler circular motions. To visualize it, think of a bicycle wheel mounted not at its true center but slightly off to one side. As you roll it forward, the hub does not travel in a straight line, it bobs up and down. The pin and slot device captures that same principle of eccentric motion and harnesses it for calculation. This single component speaks volumes about the minds behind the machine. It tells us they were not just skilled metalworkers, they were philosopher engineers who understood that a true model of reality required embracing its imperfections and complexities. They respected the data from generations of naked eye observation enough to insist their machine reflect it, no matter the mechanical difficulty. The pin and slot mechanism is more than a clever trick. It is a testament to a deep desire for truthful representation of the cosmos. It places the mechanism's design philosophy centuries ahead of its time, not for its complexity alone, but for its commitment to accuracy over simplicity. What does it mean that this level of precise, intentional mimicry of nature was achieved in bronze over 2,000 years ago? It suggests a culture where the boundary between observing the heavens and engineering their likeness had been completely dissolved. One can almost hear the designer's satisfaction the moment they saw the pointer first trace the moon's uneven path, knowing they had built a little piece of the universe that obeyed the same silent rules. The moon's elegant irregularity was just the beginning of the mechanism's ambitions. On its grand front dial, 5 other pointers stood ready to trace the paths of the wandering stars, the planets known to the ancient world. But here lies the greatest unsolved puzzle of the Antikythera mechanism. While the inscriptions confirm it displayed Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the exact gearing required to drive them with accuracy is almost entirely lost. This missing planetary system represents the final frontier of our understanding, a breathtakingly complex problem that modern researchers are still struggling to reconstruct. The core challenge is retrograde motion. From our earthly perspective, planets do not glide smoothly across the starry background. They periodically slow to a halt, move backwards in a graceful loop for weeks or months, then resume their forward journey. To ancient astronomers, this was a profound mystery, the behavior that earned them the name wanderers. To a mechanical engineer, it is a nightmare of competing cycles that must be combined into a single, smooth output from a hand crank. The surviving fragments offer only tantalizing clues. A few gears, including one famously known as the 63-tooth gear, seem to be part of a system for Venus and perhaps the Sun. But the full train for all 5 planets is a ghost in the machine. Scholars are divided on how it might have been achieved. Some, like the late Michael Wright, proposed that the device used a series of epicyclic gear trains where small gears ride on larger ones to generate the looping path. Others speculate that the planetary calculations might have been housed in a separate, now lost module that attached to the main frame, a kind of expansion pack for the cosmos. The most groundbreaking recent theory comes from the team led by Tony Freeth. In a landmark paper published in Scientific Reports, they proposed an astonishingly compact and elegant solution. Their model suggests the mechanism used a complex but unified system of nested epicycles, all driven from a single central gear. In this design, each planet's pointer was controlled by a miniaturized assembly of gears that mathematically combined its 2 main cycles, its orbit around the Sun and Earth's own orbit, to produce the observed retrograde motion. The brilliance of this idea is its parsimony. It fits the known evidence and the physical space available within the surviving casing. To understand the mathematical problem, consider the planet Mars. It takes about 687 Earth days to complete one orbit around the Sun, but from Earth, its position in our sky repeats on a cycle of roughly 780 days. The mechanism had to reconcile these 2 different periods using gears with whole numbers of teeth, creating a close approximation of the true celestial ratio. Now multiply that challenge by 5, with each planet having its own unique and often very long cycles. Jupiter's full period is nearly 12 of our years, Saturn's almost 30. The device needed to model all of them simultaneously from one input rotation. It is akin to building a mechanical model of the entire solar system using nothing but interlocking gears, where one turn of a handle makes Mercury spin furiously, Venus glide gracefully, and Saturn ponderously advance, all while occasionally making each one reverse course in a tiny, precise loop. When you grasp the scale of this engineering problem, a humbling question emerges. If the surviving 1/3 of the mechanism is this sophisticated, how much more advanced was the complete, original device? The planetary problem forces us to confront the limits of the artifact and the limits of our own assumptions. We are looking at a single, salvaged page from a vast technical manual, a manual that detailed how to build a working cosmos in bronze. This frontier of understanding reminds us that some achievements of the past are so profound, they force us to invent new methods just to comprehend them. The eclipse predictions etched in bronze became a time capsule. To understand when the mechanism was made, researchers turned it on, so to speak, and let its own astronomical forecasts point back to its birthday. This is forensic astronomy, a meticulous process of matching the devices inscribed Saro's eclipse calendar against the precise historical record of when eclipses actually occurred. Using modern celestial mechanics software, teams like the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project ran simulations, scrolling backwards through centuries to see which years aligned perfectly with the pattern of solar and lunar eclipses described on the dials. The results were striking. The eclipse predictions fit a specific historical window incredibly well. The data suggests the device's eclipse cycle was calibrated for a period beginning around 205 BC. This does not necessarily mean it was built in 205 BC, but that its gears were set to a master calendar starting from that point. Other evidence, including the style of the Greek lettering and the advanced lunar theory it employs, points to a likely construction date somewhere between 150 BC and 60 BC. Some scholars examining the wear on the gears even propose it was a working instrument for many decades, an heirloom of knowledge passed down through generations. One of the most compelling geographical clues comes from a tiny, almost casual mention on the subsidiary games dial. Alongside the great Pan-Hellenic competitions like the Olympics, the inscriptions list a local festival from the island of Rhodes. This is a powerful hint. Rhodes in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC was a renowned center of astronomy and mechanical engineering, home to the great observer Hipparchus, whose theories on the moon's motion are so perfectly mirrored in the device's pin and slot mechanism. It strongly suggests the device was either made in Rhodes or made for someone familiar with its cultural calendar. Think of it like carbon dating a painting, but instead of analyzing pigments, you are analyzing the intellectual ingredients. The astronomical knowledge baked into the gears, the specific dialect of the inscriptions, and the regional references all point to a specific time and place in the Hellenistic world. This raises a fascinating possibility. If the calibration date is 205 BC, but the device was physically built decades or even a century later, what does that tell us? It could mean the mechanism was constructed as a working replica of an even older, perhaps legendary design, a teaching tool to demonstrate established cosmic principles. Or it could be a master craftsman's implementation of theories developed by Hipparchus, built after the astronomer's death to preserve and demonstrate his genius. Pinpointing its birth is about more than a date. It is about locating its intellectual birthplace, the vibrant nexus of science, craftsmanship, and philosophy that could give rise to such a marvel. If Rhodes was indeed its home, then we are looking at the pinnacle of a specific school of thought, a physical testament to a golden age of discovery that flourished on a small island in the Aegean Sea, centuries before much of that knowledge would vanish from the world. Rhodes was a humming intellectual engine in the 2nd century BC. Picture a sun-drenched port city where the scent of salt air mixed with the tang of hot metal. Here, in workshops open to courtyards, a unique collaboration unfolded. Astronomers like the legendary Hipparchus, who had charted the stars and quantified the moon's wobble, would consult with master bronze smiths, men whose hands could translate complex ratios into teeth on a gear wheel smaller than a fingernail. This was the ecosystem required to birth the Antikythera Mechanism, a place where abstract theory and supreme craftsmanship were not separate disciplines, but two sides of the same coin. Rhodes was a renowned center for both advanced astronomy and precision engineering, a nexus for trade and ideas flowing across the Mediterranean. It is even mentioned by name on the device itself, on that small dial listing athletic games, a local signature etched in bronze. The philosopher Posidonius, who also lived and taught on Rhodes, was said to have constructed a celestial sphere, further cementing the island's reputation for such devices. The evidence for a Rhodian origin is compelling, a perfect alignment of knowledge, skill, and a physical clue. Yet there is another legendary name that casts a long shadow over this mystery, Archimedes of Syracuse. Ancient texts, particularly the writings of the Roman orator Cicero, describe a breathtaking artifact. After the Roman conquest of Syracuse in 212 BC, the Roman general Marcus Claudius Marcellus took back to Rome only one piece of plunder for himself, a mechanical planetarium built by Archimedes. Cicero writes that this device, when its handle was turned, displayed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets with such accuracy it could show solar and lunar eclipses. The description is a near-perfect match for the Antikythera mechanism. This has led some historians to propose a fascinating alternative theory, that our device is either a direct descendant of Archimedes' design, or perhaps even a later copy of it, crafted after his death. Archimedes was a genius centuries ahead of his time, a man who combined profound mathematics with practical invention. Could the mechanism be a physical echo of his lost work, a blueprint made real by later admirers? The trade route of the shipwreck itself becomes a clue in this debate. The vessel was sailing from the Greek east toward Rome, laden with luxury goods, artwork, and what was likely intellectual plunder. Its course passed directly by Rhodes and could have originated from Syracuse. Was it carrying a Rhodian-made device to a wealthy Roman patron, or was it transporting an heirloom from Archimedes' legendary workshop? looted from Syracuse decades earlier and now being sent to grace a Roman villa. We know of several ancient centers that could have supported such high technology. Alexandria, with its great library, was a powerhouse of theoretical knowledge. Pergamon was another hub of learning and craftsmanship, but Rhodes stands out for its specific blend of observational astronomy and hands-on mechanical arts, a kind of ancient Silicon Valley where theory was rapidly prototyped into reality. Imagine a modern tech startup, but in a Hellenistic workshop. The astronomer is the software engineer writing the algorithms that describe planetary motion. The mathematician is the systems architect, converting those algorithms into gear ratios. The master metalworker is the hardware engineer, physically fabricating the components with micron-level precision. Their product is not an app, but a universe in a box. This collaborative model forces us to reconsider how knowledge was commercialized and transferred in the ancient world. Was the mechanism a one-of-a-kind masterpiece for a royal court, or were there artisans producing less complex versions for wealthy scholars and temples? The existence of even one such device suggests a whole ecosystem of knowledge, from mining and alloying the bronze to the final calibration of the dials against the night sky. The workshop itself remains elusive, its exact location lost to time, but its sophistication is undeniable. Whether it stood on the island of Rhodes, inspired by Hipparchus, or in Syracuse, built upon the legacy of Archimedes, it represents a pinnacle of human ingenuity. This single artifact is a testament to a network of minds, a collaboration across disciplines that achieved something the world would not see again for over 1,000 years. It makes you wonder how many other such workshops existed, and what other wonders they produced that now lie silent at the bottom of the sea, or crumbled to dust in the ruins of a forgotten library. The name Archimedes echoes through history not just for mathematics, but for machines that seem to defy his own era. Legends speak of his ingenious defenses of Syracuse, from colossal clawed cranes that lifted ships from the sea to the fabled burning mirrors that focused sunlight into a weapon. Yet among these tales, the most relevant to our mystery is something quieter and more profound, a celestial sphere. The Roman writer Cicero, living a century after Archimedes, provides a crucial eyewitness account. He describes not one but two of these devices. One was a simple star globe, but the other was far more advanced. Cicero writes that it was built by Archimedes himself and taken to Rome by General Marcellus as his most prized war trophy. When its handle was turned, this sphere replicated the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets with such precision that it could demonstrate eclipses. The description is uncanny, a direct parallel to the functions of the Antikythera mechanism. This raises a compelling possibility that the device from the shipwreck is not a singular miracle, but a descendant, a later model from a technical lineage that began with the genius of Syracuse. Experts like historian of science James Evans suggest the mechanism represents a culmination, not a spontaneous creation. Its sophistication hints at a century or more of iterative design, of trial and error in workshops now lost to time. Could such intricate gearwork simply appear fully formed? The history of technology argues otherwise. Every complex invention rests upon a pyramid of simpler prototypes, failed experiments, and gradual refinements. For the Antikythera mechanism to exist, there must have been cruder models first, perhaps with fewer gears, or ones that tracked only the sun and moon. These earlier versions would have been the testing grounds for the mathematical ratios and mechanical solutions that later coalesced into the masterpiece we found. We see echoes of this broader engineering spirit elsewhere in the Hellenistic world. In Alexandria, decades after the mechanism was built, an engineer named Hero created astonishing automata, self-moving theatrical devices powered by steam, water, and intricate systems of strings and gears. His work proves that a culture of complex mechanical simulation was alive and well. Think of the evolution of the modern computer. The room-sized ENIAC of the 1940s did not spring from nothing. It was preceded by mechanical calculators, punch card looms, and centuries of mathematical theory. The Antikythera mechanism is the Hellenistic equivalent of a stunningly advanced laptop, but it implies the existence of its own room-sized ancestors, its own mechanical calculators that came before. This perspective transforms a single artifact into a surviving representative of an entire tradition, and that leads to a haunting reflection. Bronze was valuable, often melted down and recycled. Wood and delicate components decay, libraries burn, and workshops are plundered in war. How many other prototypes, how many instruction manuals or design scrolls were lost simply because they were made of perishable materials? The mechanism survived only by the sheer accident of sinking into the protective mud of the seafloor. Its existence is a tiny, glittering shard pointing to a vast, shadowy continent of ancient engineering, now submerged beneath the waves of time. It suggests that what we call a miracle was, in its own day, perhaps the pinnacle of a known and respected craft. To separate its functions into neat modern categories is to misunderstand the ancient mind entirely. The Antikythera mechanism was not purely a scientific instrument, nor merely a teaching aid, nor simply an astrological device. It was all of these at once, a unified tool for navigating a cosmos where the movements of the heavens were intimately woven into the fabric of human fate, agriculture, and power. In the Hellenistic world, the study of the stars was a single, profound discipline. Astronomy provided the mathematical clockwork, and astrology interpreted its meaning for society and the individual. The mechanism served this entire interconnected worldview. Its genius was its multifunctionality, a Swiss Army knife of cosmic knowledge designed for an elite audience. It was likely a demonstration piece for a wealthy patron, a tangible symbol of intellectual prestige and divine connection. It would have awed visitors in a scholar's library, its turning gears providing a physical proof of philosophical ideas about cosmic order. And it was undeniably a practical engine for the astrological practices that guided everything from state decisions to personal fortunes. Consider the inscriptions themselves. They provide the technical data needed to calibrate the dials, the hard mathematics of the Saros cycle. But right beside those numbers are words describing the potential colors of eclipses, such as dusky or blood red. In the ancient world, the color and direction of an eclipse were crucial omens used for divination, believed to foretell the fate of kings or the outcomes of wars. The mechanism did not distinguish between calculating the event and interpreting its cultural significance. It delivered both, so who were its users? We can envision a few possibilities. A royal court philosopher might have used it to advise a ruler on the most auspicious time for a coronation or a military campaign, generating the precise planetary alignments for that date. A teacher in a library like Alexandria's could have turned the crank to demonstrate Plato's idea of the harmony of the spheres, making abstract philosophy visibly, audibly real. Even practical navigators or calendar keepers for temple festivals might have consulted its star calendar and eclipse warnings. Its most fascinating application, however, lies in personal astrology. By turning the crank to a specific birth date, a scholar could have used the planetary pointers to generate the precise celestial configuration for that moment. This snapshot of the heavens, a sort of ancient birth chart, was the foundational data for casting horoscopes, which were deeply influential in medicine, marriage, and career choices in the Hellenistic era. The device automated the most complex part of that process, the astronomical calculation. Think of a modern university today that uses a giant, complex orrery to teach orbital mechanics to physics students. The professor explains the gravitational laws that govern the model's motion. but in the same room, a history professor might point to that very same orrery and explain how, for centuries, people believed those same motions directly influenced human personality and world events. The machine is unchanged, but its perceived purpose shifts with the culture that observes it. This is the central lesson of the Antikythera mechanism. It reflects a culture that saw no barrier between the calculable and the celestial, between prediction and prophecy. Its purpose was to comprehend and, in a sense, to participate in a cosmos that was rational, beautiful, and meaningfully connected to human life. The technology itself was neutral, a masterpiece of gears and ratios, but its purpose was shaped entirely by the ancient belief that to read the stars was to understand the script of destiny. What does our own technology, from genetic sequencing to artificial intelligence, say about the stories we tell ourselves today? The seafloor around Antikythera Island became a frozen moment in the 1st century BCE, a snapshot of a luxury liner of its day. The ship was a floating treasury, its hull packed with the finest goods the Hellenistic world could produce. Marine archaeologists, carefully sifting through the sediment over decades, have recovered a stunning inventory. Exquisite bronze statues, including the majestic youth of Antikythera, gleamed beside marble masterpieces like the brooding philosopher's head. Intricate glassware, silver coins, gold jewelry, and fine ceramics all spoke of immense wealth and refined taste, and among these treasures of art and opulence rested the corroded bronze fragments of the mechanism. Its presence in this company is profoundly revealing. It was not stored with common trade goods or simple tools. It was packed alongside the most valuable cultural artifacts of its age. This tells us the device was itself considered a treasure, an object of immense intellectual and likely monetary value. It was part of a consignment of high culture being transported from the Greek East to the rising power of Rome. Following the Roman conquest of Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean, there was a massive demand among the Roman elite for Greek art, philosophy, and symbols of sophistication. Victorious generals like Lucius Cornelius Solla or wealthy patrons like Julius Caesar filled their villas with such plunder and purchases to display their power and cultivation. The mechanism would have been the ultimate conversation piece, a dazzling demonstration of Greek scientific genius that its new Roman owner could literally set in motion. But why was it on this particular ship? Several theories emerge from its context. It could have been a diplomatic gift from a Greek city-state seeking favor in Rome, a tangible token of knowledge. It might have been a commissioned sale to a Roman collector, a one-of-a-kind acquisition, or perhaps most intriguingly, it was the personal property of a traveling scholar or astronomer, a vital tool being transported along with its owner. The other finds paint a vivid picture. Alongside the statues and the mechanism, archaeologists found a beautiful bronze throne, ornate furniture fittings, and delicate glass bowls. This was not a haphazard loot pile, but a carefully curated collection. Imagine a modern cargo ship today carrying a priceless exhibit of Renaissance paintings alongside a prototype for a revolutionary quantum computer. Both represent the pinnacle of human achievement in their respective realms, art and science, shipped together because they hold immense cultural and intellectual value. The mechanism's companions on the seafloor force us to reconsider how it was perceived. Was it seen primarily as a sublime piece of art, a sculptural marvel of intricate gears? Or was it recognized and valued first for its unparalleled scientific function? The likely answer is that for the people of that time, such a distinction would have been meaningless. The beauty of its craftsmanship and the brilliance of its purpose were inseparable. Its value lay in its perfect synthesis of form and function, a physical embodiment of the cosmic order that was both beautiful to behold and profound to understand. This sunken cargo suggests a world where the pursuit of knowledge and the appreciation of beauty were not separate endeavors, but intertwined strands of a single, elevated culture. It makes you wonder what other devices of similar wonder might have been lost in other shipwrecks, their bronze gears now scattered and unrecognizable on the ocean floor, mere curiosities lying next to broken pottery. The mechanism's journey ended in the silent dark of the sea, but the knowledge it represented faced an even more final oblivion on land. Its disappearance from history is not a simple accident, but a story of how entire libraries of understanding can vanish, not in a single fire, but through a slow, cascading series of fractures. This is the historical Great Filter, a combination of cultural shifts, material realities, and political collapses that erased advanced engineering knowledge for over 1,000 years. The first factor was a change in intellectual priorities. The Roman Empire, which absorbed the Hellenistic world, was a civilization of magnificent practical engineers. They built aqueducts, roads, and concrete domes that stand to this day, but their focus was on applied science, on projects that served the state, the military, and urban life. The deeply theoretical, philosophical pursuit of modeling the cosmos for its own sake, which drove the mechanism's creation, held less cultural currency. The intricate blend of astronomy, mathematics, and craftsmanship became a niche interest, no longer supported by the same vibrant ecosystem of patrons and workshops. As historian James Evans notes, this kind of specialized artisan knowledge was often an oral tradition, passed from master to apprentice in a single workshop. It was rarely written down in comprehensive manuals. If that chain was broken by conflict, economic hardship, or a simple lack of interested students, the knowledge could evaporate in a generation. The material reality of the device itself sealed its fate. Bronze was not just a metal for sculpture, it was the coin of the realm and the material of war. In times of crisis or simply when funds were needed, precious bronze objects were the first to be melted down. A delicate, complex mechanism like the Antikythera would have been seen not as an irreplaceable computer, but as a lump of valuable raw material, destined for the melting pot to become coins for a legionnaire's pay or the blade of a sword. This is a recurring tragedy in the history of technology. We see it in the loss of Roman concrete recipes during the European Middle Ages, a practical formula that simply faded from use as the societal structures that required it changed. The great centers of learning were not immune. The slow decline and eventual destruction of institutions like the Library of Alexandria represented the scattering of a critical mass of scholars and texts. Political instability, from the Roman civil wars to the later crises of the empire, disrupted the networks of trade, patronage, and peaceful scholarship that such high-end engineering required. It was a perfect storm. The culture that valued the knowledge shifted, the economic system that paid for it crumbled, and the physical artifacts themselves were recycled out of existence. This forces a reflective question about our own civilization. We live in an age of digital abundance, where we believe our knowledge is permanently saved on servers and in the cloud. But what fragile technologies do we rely on? Our entire digital world depends on a global supply chain for rare earth minerals, on stable power grids, and on the continued ability to read obsolete file formats. If those chains were broken, how much of our own advanced knowledge would become as inaccessible as the gear trains of the Antikythera mechanism? The device's long oblivion is a profound cautionary tale. It reminds us that technological progress is not a one-way street, and that the preservation of knowledge is an active, continuous cultural choice, not a guaranteed fact of history. So were there faint whispers of this technology in later centuries, hidden in manuscripts or forgotten artifacts. The search for a surviving thread leads us through 1,000 years of silence, into the great astronomical clocks of the medieval Islamic world and later Renaissance Europe. These later marvels, like the magnificent clock built by Giovanni da Dondi in the 14th century, are breathtaking in their own right. Dodondi's masterpiece, a seven-sided structure of brass and silver, displayed the motions of the Sun, Moon, and 5 planets with a complex system of over 100 gears. It feels like a direct echo, yet experts who study the history of machinery, like historian of technology Silvio Bedini, point to a crucial distinction. While these Renaissance clocks used intricate gear trains to model the cosmos, their design principles, their specific solutions to problems like planetary motion, were different. They were almost certainly independent reinventions, born from a renewed interest in Ptolemaic astronomy and the growing craft of precision clockmaking, not from a surviving blueprint of the Antikythera mechanism. The thread appears broken. Scholars scour cryptic references in Byzantine or Arabic texts for any hint of a continuous tradition. There are fascinating fragments, like the description in a 10th century Byzantine manuscript of a celestial sphere made by Archimedes, a story passed down but likely never seen by the writer. Arabic astronomers and engineers, such as the brilliant Banu Musa brothers in 9th century Baghdad, wrote detailed books on ingenious mechanical devices, including geared trick vessels and automated musical instruments. Their work proves the knowledge of complex gearing survived and even advanced in the Islamic world, but it was applied to different purposes, to automata and water clocks, not to portable astronomical calculators of the Antikythera's specific type. This suggests the possibility of isolated craftsmen, brilliant in their own right, rediscovering mechanical principles but without the deep theoretical astronomical underpinnings that guided the Greek device. They were solving different puzzles. Think of it like the myth of the phoenix, a legendary bird that burns to ashes and is reborn from them. Here, the phenomenon of complex gearing repeatedly arises from the ashes of different cultures, each time shaped by that society's unique questions and needs. In ancient Greece, it was to model a philosophical cosmos. In the medieval Islamic world, it was to display the ingenuity of God's creation through wondrous automata. In Renaissance Europe, it was to glorify God and King through public timekeeping and the ordering of the heavens. The same basic flame of ingenuity flickered back to life, but each time it illuminated a different chamber of human endeavor. This search for echoes forces a profound question about the nature of invention itself. Is parallel discovery the rule in history, where great minds separated by centuries inevitably stumble upon similar solutions when faced with similar puzzles? Or is there always somewhere a seed of prior knowledge, a half-remembered legend or a fragment of a text that provides the crucial spark? The Antikythera mechanism stands in lonely splendor, suggesting that for over a millennium that particular seed was lost. Its isolation deepens the mystery, making its sophistication not just an achievement, but a haunting reminder of how completely a peak of understanding can be erased from the collective memory of our species. For nearly half a century, the corroded fragments simply gathered dust in a museum case in Athens. They were an obscure curiosity, mislabeled and misunderstood, because the world lacked the tools and the mindset to see them for what they were. The true revelation of the Antikythera mechanism is as much a 20th century story as an ancient one, a tale of how modern science finally caught up to an artifact that had been waiting patiently for over 2,000 years. Why did it take so long? The answer lies in a necessary convergence, a perfect alignment of disciplines that only occurred in the late 20th century. For the mechanism to be understood, it required more than a single brilliant historian. It demanded a collaborative team of classical philologists to decipher its text, astronomers to interpret its functions, mechanical engineers to reconstruct its gearing, and computer scientists to model its behavior. Most crucially, it needed technologies that did not exist when it was first pulled from the sea. In the early 1900s, even the sharpest eyes could only see the outer crust. Simple X-rays used by director Solla in the 1970s provided shadowy glimpses, like trying to read a book through its closed cover. His work was foundational, but it remained speculative and incomplete because the imaging technology of his era could not penetrate the dense calcified layers to reveal the true complexity within. The societal context also played a role. The first half of the 20th century was dominated by world wars and global upheaval, periods when the resources and intellectual focus for such a niche, long-term archaeological puzzle were scarce. It was not a priority. The real breakthrough came with the development of microfocus X-ray computed tomography in the late 1990s. This technology, borrowed from medicine and industry, allowed researchers to perform a non-invasive digital autopsy, peeling back the layers of corrosion to map every tooth and inscription in 3 dimensions. This was paired with another key innovation, powerful computer modeling software. Once the CT scan data was captured, it could be fed into programs that let researchers virtually reassemble the fragments, test gear interactions, and animate the entire system. These tools acted as a time machine, restoring function to the silent gears. This pattern of discovery is not unique. Consider the unraveling of the double helix structure of DNA. That monumental discovery in the 1950s did not happen in a vacuum. It relied on the prior development of X-ray crystallography and the collaborative, sometimes competitive, work of biologists, chemists, and physicists. The right idea required the right tools and the right interdisciplinary conversation. The Antikythera mechanism forced a profound paradigm shift among historians. It challenged the long-held, almost subconscious belief that technological sophistication was a linear progression exclusive to the modern era. Before its secrets were laid bare, the ancient Greeks were celebrated as philosophers and artists, but not as precision mechanical engineers of this caliber. The mechanism shattered that comfortable narrative, proving that peaks of ingenuity could be reached, lost, and forgotten, independent of our own timeline. It rewrote chapters in the history of science and technology. The journey from simple X-rays to high-resolution tomography and advanced software modeling mirrors our own evolving ability to see into the past. It makes you wonder, with a sense of thrilling possibility, how many other museum artifacts currently sit in storage, their true stories locked inside, simply waiting for the next generation of imaging technology or analytical technique to reveal their secrets. The century-long path to comprehending this device is a powerful reminder that our understanding of history is never static. It is constantly being revised by the new lenses we invent to examine it. The silent bronze fragments have found their voice again, not in a museum, but in workshops and on computer screens around the world. To truly test our understanding, modern engineers, historians, and dedicated hobbyists have taken on a remarkable challenge: to rebuild the Antikythera mechanism from the ground up. This is more than an academic exercise. It is a physical proof of concept, a way to validate theories by seeing if they actually work when translated into moving metal. If our blueprint is correct, the gears should mesh, the pointers should trace their predicted paths, and the entire assembly should turn with the smooth logic of recovered genius. One of the most celebrated physical reconstructions was built by Michael Wright, a former curator of mechanical engineering at the Science Museum in London. Over many years, he crafted a fully functional model from brass, meticulously following the gear ratios and layouts deduced from the CT scans. His hands-on work revealed practical difficulties invisible on a computer screen: the precise filing of gear teeth to achieve perfect meshing, the challenge of minimizing friction in such a compact space, and the sheer tactile feel of the mechanism coming to life under his own hand. Wright's model proved that the proposed gear trains could indeed produce the complex outputs, turning theoretical diagrams into a whirring, ticking reality. Meanwhile, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project created stunning digital animations, virtual models that could be disassembled and tested infinitely without risking the fragile original. These CGI simulations allowed researchers to experiment with different configurations for the missing planetary system, to see which arrangements of epicyclic gears could generate the correct retrograde loops within the physical constraints of the known casing. Each new replica, whether physical or digital, incorporates the latest scholarly findings, creating an iterative dialogue between theory and practice. A modern maker builds a version based on a published paper, only to discover a subtle alignment issue that sends historians back to the inscriptions for clarification. This process mirrors the original design work in a Hellenistic workshop, a cycle of calculation, fabrication, testing, and refinement. The range of these reconstructions is vast. Some are beautiful, historically informed brass models like Wright's, displayed in museums. Others are simplified 3D printed versions created by enthusiasts in the global maker community, applying a do-it-yourself ethos to 2,000-year-old technology. There are also sophisticated interactive software simulations that anyone can download, turning a smartphone or computer into a personal Antikythera mechanism, where you can drag a slider to travel through time and watch the ancient cosmos animate before you. This act of rebuilding teaches something pure analysis cannot. It reveals the craftsmanship, the patience, and the inevitable compromises required to turn perfect mathematics into imperfect metal. You gain an intimate appreciation for the ancient artisan who, after days of careful filing, might have had a single gear bind and had to start over. It transforms the device from a mysterious artifact into a solvable engineering puzzle. What does it mean that people today are spending countless hours recreating this ancient machine? It signifies that the mechanism's true legacy is not just in what it was, but in the questions it continues to inspire. These modern replicas are bridges across time, built by hands just as curious as those that first assembled the original gears. They are a testament to a shared human drive to understand, to build, and to hear the quiet tick of a cosmos brought down to Earth. The Antikythera mechanism demands a rewrite of the entire history of technology. Its existence is a direct challenge to the comforting story we often tell ourselves, that human progress is a steady, upward climb from primitive tools to modern marvels. This device shatters that linear narrative. It is what some call an out-of-place artifact, an object whose sophistication seems impossible for its time, forcing us to redraw the map of innovation. The revised view is startling. The Hellenistic world of 2,000 years ago reached a peak of mechanical and astronomical science that would not be matched in Europe until the sophisticated clockwork of the Renaissance, over a millennium later. This was not a culture of only abstract thought. It was a vibrant society of hands-on engineering. As author Jo Marchant notes in her work on the subject, the mechanism repositions ancient Greece, showing a society where philosophers like Hipparchus worked directly with artisans to turn theory into tangible, working machines. The implications for the history of computing are perhaps the most profound. We are accustomed to tracing computers back to Charles Babbage's 19th century difference engine, or to the room-sized electronic machines of the 1940s. The Antikythera mechanism pushes that origin story back by a staggering 1,500 years. It was an analog computer in the truest sense, processing input through physical gears to generate predictive output about the cosmos. This single discovery forces revisions across multiple chapters of our textbooks. In astronomy, it shows that advanced mathematical models of planetary motion were not just theoretical, but were being physically built and used. In mechanics, it reveals a mastery of precision gearing and differential systems that history had credited to much later inventors. Even the narrative of the scientific revolution must be reconsidered. as it demonstrates that the desire to create a mechanical model of nature was not born in 16th century Europe, but was a fully realized ambition in the ancient Mediterranean. To grasp the scale of this disruption, imagine an archaeologist centuries from now digging through the ruins of a 19th century city. They unearth a perfectly preserved internal combustion engine, complete with fuel injection and computer-controlled components, from inside what appears to be a simple horse-drawn carriage. Such a find would upend every established timeline of automotive history, proving that a technological leap occurred far earlier and was then forgotten. The Antikythera mechanism is that engine in the carriage. It compels us to ask a humbling and exciting question: what other fundamental assumptions about our past, about the inevitability of progress, might be completely wrong? This artifact is more than a relic. It is a catalyst for reinterpretation, reminding us that history is not a single path, but a landscape with many lost peaks. Yet this single artifact did not emerge from a complete void. Across the ancient world, from the banks of the Euphrates to the courts of Han China, we find echoes of the same drive to quantify, calculate, and automate. The Antikythera mechanism may be the most sophisticated survivor, but it was not the only expression of ancient computational thought. To understand its place, we must widen our view. Consider the intricate Roman portable sundial discovered at Aphrodisias, a beautiful bronze instrument that folded up like a modern pocket watch. It contained gears to adjust for the date, allowing a traveler to tell local time with surprising accuracy. This was a practical computer for daily life. Far earlier, Babylonian astronomers left behind not gears, but clay tablets inscribed with step-by-step algorithms for predicting lunar phenomena and planetary positions. These were software programs written in cuneiform, executed not by a machine but by a trained scribe's hand. In China, legends and later texts describe the south-pointing chariot, a mechanical carriage topped with a figure that always pointed south, regardless of which way the vehicle turned. It likely used a system of differential gears to maintain its orientation, a clever solution to a navigational problem. Each of these devices captures a fragment of the computational spirit. Yet, as historian of science James Evans emphasizes, none approach the Antikythera mechanism's integrated complexity. They are specialized tools solving one or two problems. The mechanism was a universal machine, synthesizing dozens of astronomical cycles into a single, unified model of the cosmos. A more direct relative is the Greek astrolabe, which became widespread centuries later in the medieval Islamic world and Europe. This elegant device, a flat star chart with rotating overlays, could solve problems of time, star positions, and even trigonometry. It was, in essence, an analog computer for the celestial sphere. But it lacked internal motive power and complex gearing. It was a static instrument you manipulated by hand. The contrast is instructive. Think of the difference between a simple pocket calculator and a modern supercomputer. Both are undeniably computers, but one performs basic arithmetic while the other simulates global climate patterns or models the birth of galaxies. They exist on the same spectrum, yet belong to entirely different orders of magnitude and ambition. This comparative view reveals a spectrum of ancient ingenuity. On one end, we have ubiquitous digital tools like the abacus, a powerful mental aid for arithmetic. We have automata like the water clock or clepsydra, which use the steady flow of water to drive simple mechanisms that mark the hours or even animated small figures. These show a widespread fascination with mechanizing time and motion. The Antikythera mechanism sits at the far opposite end of that spectrum. It represents the pinnacle, a synthesis of all these threads: digital calculation, automated motion, and cosmic modeling, woven into one unparalleled device. So, does its solitary survival mean it was a unique, miraculous flowering? Or is it simply the one that escaped the melting pot, the sole representative of a whole class of sophisticated devices that once graced libraries and workshops across the Hellenistic world. The scattered evidence of simpler geared devices suggests the latter. It hints at a lost ecosystem of mechanical knowledge where the Antikythera was the masterpiece, but not the only creation. Its lonely brilliance on the seafloor may be a trick of preservation, a single glittering shard that hints at the vast, sunken continent of ancient engineering from which it came. Turning the crank was more than a calculation, it was a philosophical act. The very existence of the Antikythera mechanism, a cosmos of interlocking bronze gears, suggests a radical idea that would not dominate Western thought for another 1800 years, that the universe itself might be a kind of magnificent machine. Here, in the hands of a Hellenistic scholar, was a tangible argument for a mechanistic cosmos, a universe operating by predictable, internal laws rather than solely by the unpredictable whims of capricious gods. This was the profound intersection of technology and philosophy, where a crafted object could shape how an entire culture understood its place in the stars. We often credit Isaac Newton with envisioning a cosmic clockwork, but the seeds of that vision were being physically planted in workshops like the one that built this device. The mechanism did not just display planetary positions, it demonstrated their inevitability. Once the gears were set in motion, the future positions of the moon, the occurrence of an eclipse, the dance of the planets, all unfolded with a silent, turning certainty. This predictability, made visible and tactile, could deeply influence philosophical schools of the time. Think of the Stoics, who taught of a rational, orderly universe governed by a divine logic, or logos. The smooth, interdependent motion of the gears provided a powerful physical metaphor for their belief in cosmic sympathy, the idea that all parts of the universe were connected in a web of mutual influence. A philosopher like Posidonius, who was both a Stoic and an astronomer interested in tides and celestial phenomena, would have seen in such a device the perfect illustration of his quest for unified, rational explanations for nature. The mechanism made the abstract concrete. Before its invention, advanced astronomical theories existed as complex geometrical models in scrolls, understandable only to a highly educated few. The device transformed those abstract lines and circles into something you could hold, turn, and watch unfold. It democratized cosmic understanding in a way, making the intricate clockwork of the heavens intuitively graspable to anyone who saw it operate. This is akin to the moment when the double helix model of DNA was first built out of metal rods and plates. Before that physical model, the concept of genetic structure was a set of equations and X-ray patterns understood by a handful of scientists. The three-dimensional model made the architecture of life viscerally clear, launching a revolution in biology. The Antikythera mechanism served a similar revolutionary purpose for cosmology. It invited a profound and potentially unsettling reflection. By making the cosmos seem knowable and predictable, did the mechanism also make it seem less divine? If an eclipse could be foretold by a hand-cranked box, was it still an omen from the gods, or merely the scheduled outcome of a celestial mechanism? The device likely did not erase belief in the divine, but it certainly reframed it. It suggested the gods might operate through sublime, rational principles that human minds could, with great effort, decipher and even replicate. This was a philosophical statement cast in bronze, a declaration that the universe was not chaos, but a comprehensible order. The quiet whir of its gears was the sound of ancient reason, asserting that the night sky was not a mystery, but a magnificent equation waiting to be solved. The silent turning of the gears was a physical argument, a proof written not in ink, but in the perfect meshing of bronze teeth. Behind every rotation, every pointer's sweep, lay an invisible foundation of pure mathematics. The Antikythera mechanism was not merely assembled, it was calculated into existence. Its genius resides in the translation of celestial time, measured in months and years, into the spatial language of gear ratios, a conversion of time into teeth. Every single gear tooth count was the solution to a precise astronomical equation. To build it, its creators had to take the grand, abstract cycles of the heavens and express them as ratios of whole numbers, numbers that could then be physically factored into interlocking wheels. Consider the challenge of the Metonic cycle. This is the period of approximately 19 solar years, after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same calendar dates. For the mechanism to track this, its gear train needed to embody the ratio of 235 lunar months to 19 solar years. This is not a simple fraction. The engineers had to break this large ratio down into a series of smaller, achievable gear pairs. They might use one set of gears to model the 19-year cycle and another to handle the 235 lunar months, all ultimately synchronized by the master hand crank. This was applied mathematics of the highest order, a direct implementation of astronomical theories, like those of Hipparchus on the moon's motion, into three-dimensional machinery. The process becomes even more intricate with the Saros eclipse cycle. This period is 223 lunar months, a prime number. You cannot make a gear with 223 teeth. It would be impossibly large and fragile. So the designers used factorization. They would break 223 down into its prime factors, and then distribute those factors across multiple, smaller gears. For instance, they could use a gear with 127 teeth meshing with a gear of 32 teeth to achieve a ratio very close to the true value, the slight error corrected over the long spiral of the dial. This is where the abstract meets the artisan's file. The mathematician provided the ratio, expressed as a continued fraction to find the best approximation with manageable numbers. The craftsman then had to cut a gear with exactly 127 teeth, each one perfectly spaced, knowing that a single error would throw off the prediction of an eclipse by days or even months. Think of a modern mechanical watch. Its intricate gear train, known as the wheel train, is designed to reduce the oscillations of a balance wheel, say 18,000 beats per hour, down to the precise turn of the hour and minute hands. Watchmakers solve the same fundamental problem, translating a time standard into spatial gear rotations. The ancient engineers were doing this on a cosmic scale, solving for multiple, overlapping time standards simultaneously. This raises a reflective question about their process. How much of this design emerged from patient trial and error in the workshop, and how much was derived from first principles, from mathematical theory? The evidence points to a profound synthesis. The pin and slot mechanism for the moon's variable speed is a geometric solution to an astronomical problem, suggesting a deep theoretical understanding was guiding the hands of the metalworker. The mathematics was the true software of the hardware, the immutable code that dictated the arrangement of every wheel and pin long before the first bronze was ever cast. In this device, the line between calculating an orbit and cutting a gear tooth vanished. The cosmos itself was understood as a set of divine, interlocking ratios, and the mechanism was a humble, brilliant attempt to build a working model of that divine mathematics here on Earth. The bronze itself holds a story of fire and precision. Before a single gear could turn, the metal had to be born in the intense heat of a smelter's crucible. Copper, mined from distant mountains, was carefully alloyed with a smaller portion of tin, a process that transformed soft, malleable copper into the harder, more durable material we call bronze. This was not a random mixture. Archaeometallurgists who have analyzed the fragments find a specific composition, a tin content of around 6 to 7%. This particular ratio produced a bronze that was strong enough to hold fine detail yet soft enough to be worked with hand tools, a perfect balance for the delicate task ahead. The creation of each component was a feat of artisanal skill, beginning with the lost wax casting method, a craftsman would first sculpt a perfect model of a gear or plate in beeswax, complete with every tiny tooth and inscription. This wax model was then encased in a clay mold and fired in a kiln. The wax would melt and drain away, leaving a hollow cavity in the exact shape of the model. Molten bronze, glowing like liquid sun, was poured into this cavity. Once cooled, the clay mold was broken away to reveal the rough bronze casting inside. But this was only the beginning. The casting was crude, with rough edges and a surface pitted from the process. Now came the true test of patience and steady hands. Using fine metal files, saws, and drills made of iron or hardened bronze, the artisan would begin the painstaking work of finishing. Each gear tooth, perhaps only a millimeter or two long, had to be filed to a precise triangular profile. The spacing between teeth had to be perfectly even, or the gears would bind and jam. They used calipers to measure, and likely simple indexing devices to mark out the divisions on a gear blank before cutting. The plates were engraved with thousands of characters, each letter less than 2 millimeters high, using a sharp graver pushed by hand. The axles and pins, some no thicker than a modern paperclip, had to be turned and polished to minimize friction. Consider the environment of this ancient workshop. There were no electric lights, only daylight from a window or the flicker of an oil lamp. No magnifying glasses to enlarge the microscopic work. No standardized measuring tapes or micrometers. Every measurement was comparative, relying on the artisan's calibrated eye and the consistent use of his own handmade tools. The closest modern analogy is the master watchmaker of the 18th century, assembling a complex pocket watch entirely by hand at a bench. But the ancient craftsman had even fewer technological aids. The goal was not just to create a static sculpture, but a dynamic machine that had to operate smoothly for decades, perhaps generations. Wear was a constant enemy. To combat it, the designers employed several ingenious strategies. The gear teeth were carefully shaped to ensure they engaged with a rolling motion rather than a scraping one, reducing friction. The axles were mounted in precisely drilled holes within the bronze plates, creating simple but effective bearings. While no trace survives, it is plausible they used a natural lubricant, perhaps olive oil or animal fat, to keep the motion silky and quiet. The silent, turning cosmos they envisioned demanded near-silent mechanics. This union of mind and hand is the mechanism's most humbling aspect. We can admire the mathematical theory of Hipparchus, but it was the unnamed artisan, his hands stained with metal dust, who gave that theory physical form. For every hour the philosopher spent contemplating the heavens, the craftsman likely spent 10 in the dim light of the workshop, filing, measuring, and testing. Each perfect gear tooth represents a moment of focused human attention, a quiet triumph of skill over stubborn material. The mechanism is a monument not just to intellectual genius, but to the forgotten artistry of the hand, a reminder that the greatest ideas of any age are only realized when they are built, piece by meticulous piece, in the real world. The journey of the Antikythera mechanism from an obscure museum fragment to a global icon is a story of its own. It began its modern life confined to academic papers and specialized conferences, a puzzle for historians of science. But its implications were too profound, too visually compelling to stay within those walls. The moment it stepped into the public eye, it captured a universal fascination with lost worlds and forgotten genius. This transition was catalyzed by one of the great popularizers of science, Carl Sagan. In his legendary television series Cosmos, Sagan stood before a model of the device, his voice full of wonder. He presented it not as a dry artifact, but as a testament to the courage of human inquiry, a physical symbol of a golden age of discovery that was later swept away. That single segment, broadcast to millions, planted the mechanism firmly in the modern imagination. It became a shorthand for a thrilling idea, that our ancestors were far more advanced than our history books had led us to believe. From there, the mechanism began to appear across the landscape of popular culture. It became a plot device in historical thrillers, like Valerio Massimo Manfredi's novel The Oracle, where its predictive power is central to a dangerous ancient secret. It inspired puzzles and storylines in major video games, most notably in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where players can encounter a detailed digital reconstruction and unlock its mysteries as part of their adventure. In these fictional settings, the mechanism is more than a relic. It is an active key, a piece of technology that holds the power to unlock hidden truths or change the course of a narrative. This pop culture embrace serves a vital function. It acts as a bridge, carrying complex historical and scientific ideas from academic journals into living rooms and onto computer screens, making the distant past feel immediate and exciting. Experts who study why certain artifacts capture our collective attention point to a specific allure. The Antikythera mechanism embodies the core mystery of the so-called ancient astronaut theory, but with a crucial, empowering difference. It offers all the wonder, the sense of a hidden chapter in human history, without needing to invoke extraterrestrial intervention. It is solid, excavated proof of indigenous human genius. It satisfies our deep curiosity about technological collapse, serving as the perfect metaphor for the fragility of knowledge. In discussions about modern concerns, from digital dark ages to the resilience of civilization, the mechanism is frequently cited. It is the ultimate cautionary object, a concrete example of a high technology that was not just forgotten, but completely erased from the cultural memory for over a millennium. This makes it a powerful symbol in conversations about preserving our own legacy. Its physical presence has also expanded globally. While the original fragments remain in Athens, stunning full-scale replicas now turn in museums worldwide, from London's Science Museum to the Children's Museum of Manhattan. These working models have turned the mechanism into a star artifact, an object visitors actively seek out. They can stand before it and watch the gears turn, experiencing a direct, visceral connection to ancient ingenuity. In this way, it has achieved a status similar to the Rosetta Stone. Both are keys, one deciphering a language, the other deciphering an entire technological era. Both transformed from specialist puzzles into public symbols of discovery, reminding us that the past is never fully known, only patiently uncovered. This widespread fascination prompts a reflective question. Why does the idea that our ancestors might have been smarter or more technically capable than we assumed hold such a powerful grip on us? Perhaps it challenges a linear, superior view of progress, suggesting that brilliance is not a monopoly of the present. It introduces a thrilling uncertainty into history, hinting that there may be other peaks, other lost golden ages waiting to be found. The mechanism's journey into novels, documentaries, and games ensures its legacy is no longer just historical, but living. It continues to spark curiosity, inviting each new generation to look at the ancient world not as a primitive prelude, but as a place of profound and surprising sophistication. Decades of study have peeled back layers of crust and mystery, yet the mechanism still guards its deepest secrets. This is not a closed case in a museum archive, but a live frontier of knowledge, where new papers and advanced imaging techniques regularly rewrite what we think we know. The research is actively evolving, driven by international teams who treat each fragment not as a relic, but as a fresh clue. Several burning questions define the current edge of understanding. The most tantalizing is the complete layout of the planetary gear system. While we know the device displayed the 5 wanderers, the exact arrangement of gears that drove them with perfect retrograde motion remains a ghost in the machine. Current models, like the elegant nested epicyclic system proposed by Tony Freeth's team, are brilliant hypotheses, but they await confirmation from the silent bronze. Then there is the purpose of every single fragment. Some pieces are so corroded and shapeless that their function is utterly unknown. Were they part of a lost mounting system, a decorative cover, or even a drive mechanism for a feature we have not yet imagined? Another major question revolves around the casing. Did the original device have a protective wooden box with a hinged lid? More importantly, were the inside surfaces of that lid inscribed with a master star chart, detailed instructions, or a diagram of the cosmos that would have served as the ultimate key to its operation? Such a casing would have transformed the device from a technical instrument into a complete educational package. Experts are now looking beyond conventional X-rays. They discuss using even more advanced neutron imaging or synchrotron radiation from particle accelerators. These powerful tools can probe the internal structure of the fragments in different ways, potentially revealing hidden text or subtle compositional variations that hint at manufacturing techniques. They act like a new kind of vision, seeing not just the shape of the gears but the very history of the metal itself. Within the known inscriptions, puzzles persist. Certain sequences of Greek characters remain undeciphered, their abbreviations or technical terms lost to time. Other inscriptions reference astronomical parameters that do not perfectly match any known ancient theory, suggesting the device may encode a unique blend of sources. Then there are the anomalous gears. A few recovered wheels have tooth counts that do not neatly fit into the main reconstructed models. They are outliers, suggesting either a secondary function we have not grasped, or that our current blueprint, for all its sophistication, might still be incomplete. The search also extends beyond the physical object. Scholars continuously scour other ancient texts, from Greek astronomical commentaries to Roman poetry, for any overlooked mention of similar devices. A passing reference in a manuscript, a metaphor in a play, could be the missing link that confirms this was part of a broader tradition. Imagine an unfinished jigsaw puzzle depicting a magnificent clockwork universe. We have assembled the border and large sections of the sky, but the most complex pieces, the intricate heart of the planetary mechanism, are still scattered on the table, their shapes unclear. Each new scan, each fresh look at a faded manuscript, is an attempt to find where those final pieces fit. This ongoing quest makes the Antikythera mechanism uniquely compelling. Its story is not a concluded chapter in a history book. It is an active investigation, one you can follow as new findings are published in scientific journals and announced by research institutions. The device remains a live archaeological and scientific puzzle, a conversation across 2,000 years where we are still learning how to listen. What will the next decade of imaging reveal, and what lost word will finally make sense of a stubborn, silent gear? The Antikythera mechanism feels too perfect to be a first attempt. Its intricate gears and flawless execution suggest a long road of prior experiments, a series of simpler machines that paved the way for this masterpiece. If we accept that its creators were engineers and not magicians, then we must also accept the logical necessity of prototypes. Every complex invention in history has simpler ancestors. The Wright brothers did not build a jet engine on their first try. They began with kites and gliders, meticulously testing wing shapes and control systems. The first mechanical clocks of medieval Europe were massive, imprecise tower mechanisms, not the exquisite portable timepieces that came centuries later. Technological evolution is a process of iteration. So what might the Antikythera mechanism's ancestors have looked like? They were likely far more humble devices, perhaps crafted from wood instead of expensive bronze. A wooden model would have been the perfect testing ground. A craftsman could carve a set of gears to see if a proposed ratio for the metonic cycle would physically mesh and turn without binding. He could build a frame that held just 2 or 3 pointers, one for the sun and one for the moon, to see if the basic concept of a moving celestial display was even practical. These wooden prototypes would have been the sketchbooks of ancient engineering, where ideas were worked out in a cheap, forgiving material before committing them to precious metal. The mathematical principles themselves were ancient, known for centuries. The Babylonians had identified the Saros and Metonic cycles long before the Hellenistic era. The Greeks had refined this knowledge into sophisticated geometrical models. The revolutionary leap was not in the astronomy, but in the decision to translate those abstract cycles into interlocking physical wheels. That translation process itself must have had a history. Perhaps the first mechanical step was a simple device that did nothing more than add days, a calendrical calculator that helped priests track festival dates. Another might have been a geared astrolabe, a flat device that could solve one or two astronomical problems but lacked the ambition to model the entire cosmos. These stepping stones are now invisible to us, and that is the central challenge of this speculation. Wood decays. It is consumed by fire, eaten by insects, or simply crumbles to dust over 2 millennia. A bronze device can survive a shipwreck and centuries underwater, but a wooden prototype in a dry attic would have vanished without a trace. This creates a profound gap in the archaeological record. We have the stunning finale, but the entire first and second acts of the play are missing. This is why textual references become so crucial. When Cicero describes Archimedes' celestial sphere, was he describing a device identical to the Antikythera mechanism, or something conceptually similar but mechanically simpler? The writings of ancient engineers like Hero of Alexandria describe all sorts of geared devices and automata, proving the knowledge was widespread. Could some of those descriptions be echoes of earlier, cruder models of cosmic machines? The absence of physical evidence for these predecessors is not proof they never existed. It is a testament to the fragile, perishable nature of innovation's early stages. It forces us to read history with a different kind of imagination, to see the silent spaces between artifacts as filled with the ghosts of experiments that worked well enough to inspire the next attempt, but not well enough to be cast in bronze and preserved for the ages. How many brilliant ideas from the ancient world lived and died in a carpenter's workshop, leaving not a single splinter for us to find? This line of thought transforms a single artifact from a miraculous anomaly into the pinnacle of a lost tradition. It fills the logical gap between a brilliant idea and a finished masterpiece with the quiet, necessary work of trial and error. A ship captain in the ancient Mediterranean faced a vast and trackless sea with only the stars, the sun, and a deep knowledge of seasonal winds to guide him. Navigation was an art of memory and observation, of following coastlines and noting the changing positions of constellations that marked the safe sailing seasons. The Antikythera mechanism, with its whirring gears modeling the cosmos, seems a world apart from this practical, salt-stained reality. Yet its very precision invites a speculative question: could this celestial computer have served the mariner? While it was certainly not a shipboard instrument, its genius may have found a practical purpose in the planning rooms long before a vessel ever left port. The primary challenge of ancient navigation was determining one's position. Without a magnetic compass or accurate timekeeping, sailors relied on dead reckoning, estimating their progress from a known starting point based on speed and direction. Latitude, however, could be roughly gauged by observing the height of the North Star above the horizon. Here, the mechanism's star calendar, its parapegma, becomes relevant. The inscriptions on its front plate meticulously noted the dates when specific constellations would rise or set at dawn or dusk. For a navigator, this was not abstract astronomy, it was a seasonal schedule. Knowing that the Pleiades cluster was about to disappear into the evening twilight signaled the end of the safe sailing season in the Mediterranean, a time of increasing autumn storms. The device could generate this calendar for any given year, allowing a planner to create a customized sailing almanac for an upcoming voyage. A more direct and potentially life-saving application involves the moon. The mechanism tracked the lunar phase and position with extraordinary accuracy. In the tideless Mediterranean, this might seem less critical, but for voyages venturing into the Atlantic or to ports with significant tidal ranges, such as those near the Strait of Gibraltar, predicting tides was vital. Tides are governed primarily by the moon's phase and its alignment with the sun. A scholar using the mechanism could calculate the times of new and full moons, and thus the spring tides for months or even years in advance. This information, transcribed onto a wax tablet or parchment, could tell a captain the best window to enter a tricky harbor or avoid a treacherous current. It transformed celestial mechanics into a safety briefing. The fragility of the device itself is the strongest argument against its direct use at sea. Its finely cut bronze gears, mounted in a relatively thin wooden case, would not have survived the constant vibration, salt spray, and humidity of a wooden ship. It was a precision instrument for a library or a court, not a rolling deck. Yet this does not rule out a practical lineage. Historians of navigation suggest the possibility of simplified, robust versions derived from its principles. Imagine a sturdy bronze disc with a few geared pointers, sealed against the elements, designed solely to display the current lunar phase and the date against a fixed star calendar. Such a tool would be the nautical equivalent of a modern pilot's flight computer, a dedicated device for a single, vital task. The relationship is best understood through a modern analogy. A commercial airline pilot does not design the flight plan in the cockpit. They use sophisticated software on the ground to calculate fuel loads, optimal altitudes, and weather avoidance routes. That software is the planning tool. The cockpit instruments are the execution tools. The Antikythera Mechanism was the ultimate planning software. A navigator or ship owner could consult it before a voyage to determine the most auspicious celestial conditions, to note the warning dates for stormy seasons, and to understand the tidal patterns of distant ports. The data it produced was the practical tool, even if the gleaming bronze machine itself stayed safely ashore. This line of inquiry blurs the distinction we often make between theoretical and applied science in the ancient world. The mechanism demonstrates that the Greeks did not see a hard boundary between understanding the cosmos and using that understanding to navigate human affairs, whether setting a festival date or potentially planning a trading expedition. Its value may have been precisely this duality. It was a philosophical demonstration of cosmic order that also generated eminently useful data for timekeeping, agriculture, and perhaps the sea. So while we will never find a barnacled mechanism in a shipwreck's navigation kit, its silent calculations may have once charted a course, not through the stars, but across the very real and dangerous waters that connected the ancient world. The gleaming bronze and ivory of the mechanism spoke a language of exclusivity. In a world where the vast majority of the population was engaged in farming, fishing, or basic trades, this device was not just a technological marvel, it was a profound social statement. Its very existence was predicated on a rare convergence: an elite patron with immense wealth, a master craftsman with years of specialized training, and a user educated enough to comprehend its celestial output. To commission such an object was to display a command over resources that went far beyond the ordinary. The cost was staggering, not merely in materials but in time. The bronze itself was valuable, but the true expense was the labor. A master metalworker and his apprentices might spend a year or more on a single device, from the initial wax models to the final polishing of each microscopic gear tooth. This was not factory production, it was bespoke craftsmanship at its most extreme, the ancient equivalent of commissioning a masterpiece from a renowned artist or sculptor. Who could afford such an indulgence? The most likely patrons were at the very pinnacle of Hellenistic society. A royal court, like that of the Ptolemies in Alexandria or the Attalids in Pergamon, seeking to demonstrate its patronage of the arts and sciences. A fabulously wealthy Roman aristocrat, perhaps a general like Marcellus or a politician like Cicero, building a private collection of Greek genius to showcase his sophistication. Or a major institution, most famously the Great Library of Alexandria itself, which might have housed such a device as a crowning demonstration of its mission to gather all the world's knowledge. The user, however, required a different kind of wealth, intellectual wealth. Literacy in the ancient world was not widespread. To read the tiny, technical Greek inscriptions on the mechanism's plates required an advanced education, one typically available only to the sons of the elite or to scholars supported by wealthy patrons. Beyond simple literacy, the user needed specialized training in astronomy and mathematics to interpret what the dials were showing. They had to understand the zodiac, the concept of planetary cycles, and the meaning of eclipse predictions. This was not a tool for the common citizen. It was a sophisticated instrument for philosophers, royal tutors, and perhaps astrologers advising powerful clients. Its social function was multifaceted. In a royal court, it served as a breathtaking conversation piece, a physical symbol of the ruler's connection to cosmic order and divine wisdom. It could be used to educate the children of the elite, turning abstract lessons about the heavens into a captivating, interactive display. Most significantly, it represented a form of soft power, control over knowledge. In an age where predicting an eclipse or interpreting a planetary alignment could influence public opinion and political decisions, the possessor of this machine held a unique key to understanding and potentially manipulating events deemed to be guided by the stars. Consider a modern parallel, the private space telescope or a dedicated supercomputer used for climate modeling. These are tools of immense power and insight, but they are accessible only to billionaires, major corporations, or government research institutions. They generate knowledge that can shape markets, influence policy, and redefine our understanding of the universe, yet that knowledge originates from a rarefied sphere far removed from everyday life. The Antikythera mechanism occupied a similar niche in its own time. It prompts a difficult but necessary reflection. Does transformative technology always begin as a luxury of the powerful, a tool to consolidate prestige and influence before its benefits, if ever, trickle down to wider society? The intricate gears of this ancient computer reveal not just the heights of Greek science, but the deep social stratification that supported it. It was a masterpiece born from a world where the pursuit of ultimate knowledge was inextricably linked to displays of wealth and status, a reminder that innovation rarely happens in a social vacuum. Its bronze gears turned not to tell time but to compute the cosmos. This is the crucial distinction that links this ancient artifact directly to the machines that define our modern world. The Antikythera mechanism was not a clock, it was a computer. Specifically, it was an analog computer, a machine that uses continuous physical quantities to model a system. In this case, the physical quantity was the rotation of its gears, and the system it modeled was the entire known universe. Every turn of the hand crank was an input, and the resulting positions of the pointers on its dials were the calculated output. It processed information through the literal meshing of metal teeth, solving complex astronomical equations with a physical elegance that digital computers would not achieve for 2 millennia. This places the mechanism at the very beginning of a lineage of computation that stretches unbroken to the devices we hold in our hands today. Computer historian Doron Swad, an expert on Charles Babbage's work, points to the mechanism as a profound precursor. He notes that while it was a specialized, fixed-purpose machine, its core principle encoding mathematical relationships into geared mechanisms is the same principle that drove Babbage's 19th-century difference engine, a magnificent brass machine designed to compute mathematical tables. Babbage's later, more ambitious analytical engine, with its proposed punch card programming, was a conceptual leap toward general-purpose computation, but its mechanical soul was inherited from a tradition the Greeks had already mastered. The mechanism's design represents a foundational idea in computing, that information can be encoded into physical structures. Its gear trains were a form of hardware where the software was permanently built in, the ratios of their teeth representing unchangeable astronomical constants. This is a direct ancestor to the way early mechanical calculators worked, and it even informs early coding theory, where the arrangement of physical parts carries specific meaning. You can find the Antikythera mechanism featured in modern textbooks on the history of computing, not as a curious footnote, but as a legitimate chapter 1. It redefines the timeline, showing that the desire to automate calculation is not a product of the industrial age, but a human impulse as old as our fascination with the stars. To understand its analog nature, consider a more recent example, the slide rule. For centuries, engineers and scientists used this simple tool for multiplication, division, and trigonometry. By sliding two engraved scales against each other, they performed calculations through direct physical analogy. The slide rule did not process numbers as discrete digits, it used continuous lengths to represent logarithmic values. It was a portable, brilliant analog computer, now rendered obsolete by the digital calculator. The mechanism operated on a similar principle, but its scales were circular and its movements were automated by gears. Both devices solve problems by creating a physical model of a mathematical relationship. This invites a reflective shift in perspective. We are accustomed to thinking of computers as boxes that crunch numbers using streams of ones and zeros. But computation is a broader idea. It is any process that takes an input, follows a set of rules, and produces an output. The Antikythera mechanism did exactly that. Its rules were the gear ratios, its input was the turn of a crank, and its output was a prediction of celestial motion. From this vantage point, the journey from bronze gears to silicon chips is not a story of replacement, but of evolution. The underlying goal remains constant: to build a machine that can reliably and automatically mirror the logic of our world, whether that world is the orbit of planets or the flow of digital information. The mechanism stands as a foundational node in the vast network of computational history, a quiet proof that the seeds of our digital age were first cast, not in code, but in the precise, turning light of ancient bronze. The fragments resting in their climate-controlled case in Athens represent a delicate truce between past and present. This is not a static exhibit, but an active front line in a silent war against chemistry and time. For the conservators entrusted with its care, the Antikythera mechanism is a patient in perpetual, fragile recovery. 2,000 years under the sea did not merely tarnish the bronze, it transformed it. The metal has undergone a process called mineralization, where the original copper and tin have slowly reacted with seawater, forming new, brittle crystalline structures. The intricate gears are no longer solid metal, but a kind of metallic ceramic, incredibly fragile to the touch. The original wooden frame that held everything together vanished centuries ago, eaten by marine organisms, leaving the gear assemblies without their structural support. And the inscriptions, those microscopic letters holding the key to its function, are etched into this fragile, mineralized surface, each one a potential loss waiting for a careless breath or a subtle vibration. The primary enemy in the lab is not neglect, but an active chemical process known colloquially as bronze disease. This is a cyclical corrosion where chlorides from the seawater, trapped deep within the metal, react with moisture and oxygen to form a powdery, bright green substance. If left unchecked, this disease can literally eat through the bronze, turning solid gears into dust. Conservators combat this with a multi-layered strategy. The fragments are kept in a sealed environment with rigorously controlled humidity, often below 40%, to starve the chemical reaction of the water it needs. They may apply gentle chemical stabilizers like benzotriazole, which forms a protective layer on the metal surface, halting further decay. Every fragment is monitored with non-invasive techniques, such as high-resolution photography and three-dimensional scanning, to track the tiniest change over years. The central dilemma for these experts is profound. How do you preserve an object for future generations of scientists who may have tools we cannot yet imagine, while also allowing current researchers to study it? Every handling, every scan, even the light used to examine it carries a risk. It is a balance between access and protection. The cleaning process itself is a testament to patience. Early attempts in the 1950s used mechanical tools, risking damage to the surface. Today, the approach is far more conservative. Ultrasonic scalers, which use high-frequency vibrations to loosen deposits without touching the metal, and microscopic tools under magnification, are the standard. The goal is not to make it look new, but to stabilize its current state, to freeze its decay in time. This philosophy touches on a core ethical question in conservation: restoration versus preservation. Restoration aims to return an object to its presumed original appearance, which often requires conjecture and adding new material. Preservation seeks only to halt deterioration, maintaining the artifact exactly as it was found, with all its historical wounds intact. For the Antikythera mechanism, the path is clear: preservation. No one would dream of recasting missing gears or re-engraving faded text. Its value lies in its authenticity, in every crack and corrosion product that tells the story of its 2 millennia underwater. We can see a parallel in the ongoing work with the wreck of the Titanic. There, marine archaeologists and conservators face a similar battle against iron-eating bacteria and extreme pressure, debating whether to recover artifacts for study or leave them as a memorial site on the ocean floor. Each recovered teacup or piece of machinery requires years of desalination and stabilization to prevent it from crumbling in open air. The mechanism presents the same fundamental challenge on a smaller, more intense scale. Its very fragility forces us to confront our responsibility as temporary custodians. Every time we choose to scan a fragment or adjust its display case, we are making a decision that will echo for centuries. How do we weigh our burning desire to know its secrets today against our duty to ensure it still exists for the curious minds of the year 2500? The quiet, meticulous work in the conservation lab is a modern marvel in its own right. It is a science of care, ensuring that this whisper from the ancient world does not fade before we have learned all it has to say. This ancient device is finding a new purpose in modern classrooms, not as a relic, but as a living bridge to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The Antikythera mechanism is a perfect multidisciplinary teaching tool, a single object that makes abstract concepts from physics, astronomy, and engineering suddenly tangible and historically compelling. Its story transforms a lesson on gear ratios from a dry equation into a detective hunt across 2,000 years. Educators around the world are now using this artifact to show students that STEM subjects are not isolated silos, but interconnected ways of understanding our universe, a connection the Greeks themselves would have instantly recognized. Expert science teachers point to its unique power to engage students on multiple levels. A history lesson on the Hellenistic world comes alive when you can then explore a virtual model of the mechanism's gears. A physics unit on rotational motion gains depth when students calculate the tooth counts needed to model the 19-year Metonic cycle. An astronomy class discussing lunar phases can watch a digital simulation of the moon pointer with its ingenious pin and slot device, accurately tracing the moon's variable speed across a virtual zodiac. The mechanism provides a narrative, a mystery that students can help solve, applying the scientific method themselves as they form hypotheses about missing gears or test reconstructions. Classroom activities are as varied as the device is complex. Students can use free online simulations to virtually crank the mechanism and watch eclipses predicted on the Saros dial, linking mathematics to a celestial event. They can attempt to design their own simple gear train to model a single astronomical cycle, like the sun's annual journey, learning firsthand about mechanical advantage and precision. Some teachers use three-dimensional printable models of the fragments, allowing students to handle physical pieces and puzzle over their assembly, fostering spatial reasoning and engineering design thinking. The key is its ability to teach about cycles, models, and evidence. The device is a physical model of cosmic cycles, demonstrating how humans use scaled representations to understand phenomena too large or too slow to observe directly. Its incomplete state teaches a crucial lesson about the nature of scientific evidence. We often have to build our understanding from fragments, testing our ideas against what survives. Numerous resources support this educational mission. Museums like the National Archaeological Museum in Athens offer detailed online exhibits. Universities host interactive websites where users can zoom in on CT scan data. Open-source projects provide files for three-dimensional printing accurate replicas of the gears, and coding platforms allow students to write simple programs that animate the mechanism's functions. This transforms passive learning into active discovery. An illustrative lesson might start with a simple question: how did ancient people know when an eclipse would happen? From there, students explore the concept of cyclical patterns in nature, discover the Saros cycle, and then see how the mechanism's designers translated that time-based pattern into the spatial arrangement of bronze gears. They are not just memorizing facts, they are retracing a 2,000-year-old intellectual journey. This prompts a reflective question for any educator. What other historical artifacts or stories could serve as a gateway to make fundamental STEM principles resonate more deeply? The Antikythera mechanism, crafted as a teaching aid for an ancient elite, has become a democratizing force in 21st century education. It proves that the most powerful lessons often come not from a textbook, but from a story, a puzzle, and the enduring human desire to build a model of the world. The Antikythera mechanism is not an isolated miracle. It is a single, breathtaking survivor from a much larger landscape of lost innovation, a landscape now shrouded in silence. To see it as a unique fluke is to misunderstand history. For every technological marvel that survived into our modern record, countless others vanished completely, their secrets dissolving with the societies that created them. This was the norm in a world before industrial standardization and mass literacy, a world where advanced knowledge often lived and died in the minds and hands of a few masters. The mechanism is our most vivid clue, but it points toward a whole forgotten tapestry of ancient ingenuity. Consider the legendary Greek fire, a terrifying incendiary weapon used by the Byzantine Empire. Historical accounts describe a liquid flame that could burn on water, a decisive naval advantage for centuries. Its exact composition was a state secret so closely guarded that it disappeared entirely from history. Was it a primitive form of napalm or a chemical mixture involving quicklime or naphtha? We see its effects in chronicles, but the formula itself is a ghost, a technological black hole whose destructive power we can infer but never replicate from the original instructions. Or look to the very foundations of Rome. Roman concrete, used to build the Pantheon's still-standing dome and massive harbors, possessed a durability that often surpasses modern concrete, especially in seawater. Modern analysis shows it used a specific mix of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater that created rare, strengthening crystals as it cured. Yet the full practical recipe, the artisan's knowledge of mixing and curing, faded after the empire's administrative collapse. The knowledge wasn't written down in a manual, it was a craft passed from mason to apprentice. When that chain broke, the formula effectively died, only being partially rediscovered through modern materials science. Then there is the mystery of Damascus steel, the fabled material of Middle Eastern swords renowned for their sharpness, flexibility, and distinctive watery pattern. The original method, involving Wootz steel from India and a specific forging process, was lost by the 18th century. We have the beautiful blades, and we can analyze their nanostructure to find carbon nanotubes, but we cannot perfectly recreate the original artisan's process from start to finish. It was a tacit knowledge, a feel in the smith's hands as he folded and cooled the metal, that never made it into a textbook. Even in hydraulic engineering, the Minoans of Bronze Age Crete had sophisticated plumbing and stormwater management systems that would not be matched in Europe for over 3,000 years. That systemic knowledge was buried by volcanic eruption and cultural collapse. Historians of technology like Kevin Kelly emphasize that loss was the default for pre-industrial innovation. These were technologies of tacit knowledge, embedded in skill and practice rather than in universally accessible blueprints. They vanished for a web of interconnected reasons. Sometimes it was deliberate secrecy, like Greek fire, where knowledge was hoarded as power. Often it was a lack of widespread documentation, techniques passed orally in guilds or families. Material scarcity could play a role. If the source of a unique ore or ingredient dried up or a trade route was cut. And most devastatingly, social collapse, invasion, or economic disintegration could scatter the community of practitioners, leaving no one to teach the next generation. It is crucial to differentiate between inventions that were truly lost and those that were independently rediscovered later. The steam engine, for instance, had a known precursor in Hero of Alexandria's Eolipile, a spinning metal sphere powered by steam. That device was a curiosity not applied to industry. The principle was lost, then reinvented millennia later in a different social and economic context that could harness its power. True loss is when the knowledge leaves no continuous thread, when the very question of how something was done becomes a puzzle for archaeologists and engineers. Think of this lost legacy as a series of black holes in the historical record. We know something of immense technological gravity was there because we can see its effects, its pull on events. We see the undefeated Byzantine fleets and infer Greek fire. We see the indestructible Roman piers and infer their concrete. We hold the impossibly sharp Damascus blade and infer a metallurgical genius we cannot fully grasp. The Antikythera mechanism is unique because we have recovered the black hole itself, a dense, complex object that allows us to finally measure the gravity of the knowledge that once surrounded it. It forces us to ask what truly defines a technological dark age. It is not necessarily a period without innovation, but one where the transmission of complex, applied knowledge fails. It is a rupture in the chain of learning. The mechanism, in all its solitary glory, is not the entire story. It is merely the one gleaming tip of a vast, sunken iceberg of ancient science, most of which remains hidden in the deep, cold darkness of forgotten time. The story of ancient computers does not end with this one device. It is a narrative still being written, its next chapters waiting to be discovered in the silt of the seafloor or the ashes of a library. The most thrilling prospect is the simple, tangible hope that another mechanism is out there. Perhaps a better preserved sister device lies in the cargo hold of a different wreck, buried in the mud off the coast of a major Hellenistic port like Rhodes, Alexandria, or Syracuse. It could rest in the ruins of a Roman villa, a prized possession of a wealthy collector, or even await recognition in a museum basement, mislabeled among unstudied bronze fragments. The potential for such a find is not mere fantasy. It is a logical possibility given the scale of ancient trade and the mechanism's clear value. A single new discovery could rewrite our understanding all over again. Imagine uncovering a device with its wooden case intact, its protective lid inscribed with a master star chart or a detailed philosophical treatise on the cosmos it models. A complete, uncorroded gear train would finally solve the planetary puzzle, showing us the exact arrangement of epicycles its creators engineered. We might even find a maker's signature, a name etched in the bronze, finally giving credit to the workshop genius who has been anonymous for 2 millennia. A better preserved specimen could reveal if there were variations, a simpler model for students or a more complex one for a royal court. It could show where patterns from decades of use, telling us how often it was consulted and for what purposes. The inscriptions would be fully legible, potentially including not just a user manual, but the astronomical source material, referencing the works of Hipparchus or even Archimedes by name. This would transform the device from a solitary marvel into a documented node in a network of knowledge. The search for such artifacts is being revolutionized by the tools of future archaeology. Autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with high-resolution sonar and sensitive metal detectors can now systematically scan vast areas of the seabed, identifying promising anomalies without a single diver needing to descend. These robotic explorers can reach depths that were once unreachable, opening entirely new chapters of maritime archaeology. On land, one of the most tantalizing frontiers is the Villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum. This Roman library was carbonized by the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius, preserving hundreds of scrolls into brittle, unopenable blocks. Advanced scanning techniques like synchrotron X-ray phase contrast tomography are now being used to virtually unwrap these scrolls, detecting the faint carbon trace of ink without ever touching the fragile material. It is entirely possible that within these blackened lumps lies a lost text describing the construction of celestial machines, a treatise by Archimedes himself, or an inventory listing such a device. Furthermore, artificial intelligence is beginning to assist in the monumental task of sorting through archaeological databases, cross-referencing artifact descriptions, and spotting patterns that a human researcher might miss. An AI could one day flag a curious, unidentified bronze fragment in a digital catalog from a museum halfway around the world, linking it to the known gear profiles of the Antikythera mechanism. Experts often speculate on the most likely places for a new find. The Eastern Mediterranean, crisscrossed by ancient trade routes and littered with thousands of documented wrecks, remains the prime candidate. The waters around Sicily and southern Italy, where Roman ships laden with Greek plunder sailed home, are another promising zone. On land, the sites of major philosophical schools or royal capitals hold potential. The ongoing, centuries-long search for the tomb or workshop of Archimedes in Syracuse embodies this enduring quest. While his burial place remains lost, the very persistence of the search highlights our belief that physical evidence of such genius must still exist somewhere. This forward-looking perspective leaves us with a powerful sense of anticipation. The next great discovery could be announced tomorrow, from a robotic submersible's feed or a laboratory's digital scan. The narrative of human innovation is not a closed book, but a living manuscript where new pages are constantly being uncovered. Every time a new technology allows us to see the past more clearly, we are given another chance to listen to its whispers. The story of the Antikythera mechanism and the lost legacy it represents is ultimately a story about the resilience of curiosity. It assures us that even the most silenced chapters of our history have a way of finding their voice again when we learn how to listen. The story of this ancient computer is more than a history lesson. It is a mirror held up to our own age. We have followed its journey from a chance discovery in stormy seas to the quiet hum of modern laboratories, from a misunderstood lump of bronze to a recognized masterpiece of human ingenuity. This single device rewrites the narrative of progress, proving that the timeline of innovation is not a straight, inevitable climb, but a landscape dotted with magnificent peaks that were later shrouded in mist. The Antikythera Mechanism represents one such peak, a summit of mechanical and astronomical thought reached over 2,000 years ago, then lost to the world for longer than the entire span of the Roman Empire. Its silent gears challenge a comforting arrogance, the belief that our modern civilization is the first to truly grasp the mechanics of the cosmos or to build complex machines to model them. We are not the first to ask these questions, we are simply the latest in a long line of curious minds. The legacy of this artifact is a profound humility. It deepens our respect for the intellectual giants of the past, not as primitive philosophers, but as brilliant engineer philosophers whose workshops were as advanced as their libraries. They looked at the same night sky we do and dared to build a working replica of its motion, tooth by precise bronze tooth. This invites a reflection on our own legacy. What creations of our technological age will survive the millennia, and how will they be understood? Will future civilizations, sifting through our digital dust, find artifacts that seem as miraculous and out of place as the Antikythera Mechanism does to us? The poet Shelley once wrote of a shattered statue in the desert, its inscription a boast to mighty kings, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." The message was one of inevitable ruin, of pride laid low by time. But here the works inspire a different feeling. We look upon these corroded gears and feel not despair, but awe and a thrilling connection. This is not a monument to fallen pride, but a testament to enduring curiosity. It whispers that human genius can flame brightly in any era, and that the recovery of lost knowledge is itself a kind of triumph. The true lesson of the Antikythera Mechanism is about the fragility and resilience of understanding. It reminds us that preserving knowledge is an active cultural choice, and that every generation has the responsibility to listen for the whispers from past peaks, lest they be forgotten again. If this journey into the heart of an ancient mystery has captivated you, consider subscribing for more explorations into the world's greatest historical puzzles. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What other lost technologies do you believe are waiting silently for their moment of rediscovery? The gears of history never stop turning, and the next great discovery is always just one curious glance away.